I'm kind of an expert on it.
What's wrong with
Pours me a Scotch rocks.
about the ice?
The water actually in the ice. I'm kind of an expert on it.
What's wrong?
No big secret. It's been in the news. Government additive. Something they call chloramine.
Yeah, they said it's good for us. It's like fluoride or something.
Well, that's what they say.
A new additive is being put in the water supply. It's called chloramine. It's not news. Well, let me say it's been reported, but no one's asking questions yet. And what should they be asking? If you want to deliver something to everyone's home in America, what better way than through what's most taken for granted, water? Look, I've had my fair share of outrageous conspiracy theories, okay? So cut the mystery crap. Chloramine is just a substitute for chlorine. You can drink it, and it's harmless. Unless someone were to quietly go and change its molecular makeup.
Hey guys, enter the stars. And depopulation is underway. First in Flint, Michigan, with the adding of chloramine to the water to leach lead. And now in Stockton, just beginning this year, a place where I grew up. Casey at the Bat was from Mudville, Stockton. Aaron Brockovich talks about the water issues in Stockton. Listen to this broadcast.
Leading water quality activists is telling the city of Stockton they are making a major mistake by switching the chemicals it uses to disinfect drinking water. Aaron Brockovich, and a water treatment expert, talked by satellite today with our investigative reporter Tom Jensen about the city's plan to disinfect the water with chloramine instead of chlorine. Stockton was forced to make those changes to the way it treats water because it had levels of a probable cancer-causing compound called disinfection byproducts, or DBPs. Flint, Michigan made a similar switch to chloramine after it violated EPA regulations for DPBs, and after it made the change, Flint then began seeing those dangerously high levels of lead in the drinking water.
And after it made the change, Flint then began seeing those dangerously high levels of lead in the drinking water.
Why would you begin to add chloramine to drinking water in another major city after you had the same mistake in Flint, Michigan? This is recent. This just started this year in January after the Flint controversy, because they don't count on people like you and me to put the puzzle pieces together and be watching these things, because everybody's too busy watching football. Everybody's too busy watching J-Lo and all of the other artists and actresses on television. And everybody's too busy doing their drugs and drinking and partying it up. So guess what? We will fight. This is unacceptable. And they're telling us what they're going to do before they do it. They're telling us that they are going to poison us. Take care and be safe, you guys.
And after it made the change, Flint then began seeing those dangerously high levels of lead in the drinking.
Sorry, I'm late this morning, kept you waiting. And before we get into today's X-Files Decode, this peculiar episode that came out, I think, in the 1990s, that seemed to reveal the parable of the wheat and the tares. The mark, in this case, is a tattoo. Before we get into that, I wanted to share this amazing channel that I found that tells the true story about Rushkin life. And this is just a couple, regular average family, markets America, very close. Who doesn't like this, right? But they're to be hopping on you to see the right. That's what they're really saying. Meanwhile, wages have not gone up significantly. Things that you and I talk about, we're taking people out. They're still controlling things, and because there's a lot of people having their lives disrupted together, is that the tear is in all of us. That's why they can't be separated. Think about it. Something is growing inside of something else. You can't tear it apart. You can't separate it. That to me makes more sense than, oh, there's a race over there and a race over here. It's more like an inner struggle, an inner demon, an inner battle that we have to fight throughout our life. It's the sinful tendency, or what I like to call the infection, because we were all infected at the garden, weren't we? And it can even be narrowed down further to the copper component in our physiology. Now, we delved into that in previous shows about how you do have an essential need for trace amounts of copper, and that it seems to find itself in the middle of everything, in the middle of cell communication and brain waves and your neurological system. It's the blue blood. Why do we call it the blue blood? Because copper oxidizes into a blue-green color. And many organisms on Earth have copper-based blood, hemocyanin. And some people have more of this concentrated in their blood and more of a dependence on it, and some people have less. Now, I don't want to get into too much of the anatomy and physiology of it, because that's not really important. This is more of a spiritual discussion, because it seems the entire human race has been infected with the copper serpent. So, at the end of the day, it boils down to will. Will we do good, as God challenged Cain to do, or will we let our dark side take over? Now, it's crazy, because we got this whole thing going on YouTube that likes to condemn certain races of people, okay? And this is antichrist. This is against what Christ taught. Christ came to save everybody. He several times healed people that weren't in his bloodline. He healed Gentiles, didn't he? So if they were condemned, why would he heal them, right? This is about belief in him. People tell me that the blue bloods are condemned to destruction. But are they really? Look at how God tried to negotiate with Pharaoh, for instance. He could have wiped him out with the first plague, couldn't he? That doesn't sound like condemnation to me. Sounds like God was trying to work with him, didn't it? He tried to give him chances. But in the case of the Pharaoh, his blue blood tendencies took over, probably much more concentrated than in the rest of the general population, because the pharaohs, talked about the serpent and worshipped the serpent. This is why God embarrassed the Pharaoh by having his rods that Aaron threw down turn into serpents and eat the Pharaoh serpent. Because then, hey, who's controlling? Who's the king? The Pharaoh wanted to say that he was the king of the serpents, right? Because they would wear these on their heads. But that wasn't the case. God embarrassed him. So, let me give you the backdrop of this episode before we get into this. It opens with this guy right here. And he gets a tattoo of a woman who's winking on his arm. Let me play a little bit of this for you. There it is, and the tattoo says, "Never again." Now, this guy comes out of a failed relationship in which he was humiliated by his previous girlfriend, and she took his children, and so he goes to the tattoo parlor, he gets this tattoo, "Never again." Like, I'm never going to go through that again. And he basically becomes a woman hater. But here's what happens. The tattoo marks him, and it begins to manipulate his behavior, or possess him, or mind control him. Let's keep playing this out here.
Loser.
Such as?
You see, stem cells from the blood of an umbilical cord may be transplanted in the treatment of many life-threatening diseases.
So, there you hear him, and he's basically a stockbroker, and he's trying to sell this stock, and he's explaining to this woman on the other end of the line that it's about stem cells. A biosciences company that has developed a stem cell line from an umbilical cord to treat chronic diseases. Well, we talked a lot about umbilical cords because they seem to spiral like a portal. And when we're born into sin, aren't we? That's what the Bible tells us. So this is where the tainted blood begins. from the sinful mother to the child. So he starts hearing this woman's voice in his head, disparaging and demeaning him as he tries to sell the stock to this customer. Let's keep playing this here.
A company in Tucson called CryoCord has achieved an amazing advancement in the technology of cryogenics, such
Loser.
That's your assignment while I'm gone. I want you to run an INS check and a Bureau NCIC check on these individuals, all of whom now reside in the Little Russia section of Philadelphia. IC check on these individuals.
Now, here's what's weird. There's a Rushkin connection here that shouldn't really be here, right? It's a subplot or sub-story to the episode, and it's basically the reason why Scully ends up meeting the guy with the tattoo. She's basically running down a lead on the Rushkins that she's tracking, right? And that's how she ends up running into this guy. Let's keep watching. Now, let me stop again. What could this mean? I don't really know what this means. Okay, to be honest with you, I don't really know. Other than maybe this is a timeline of some kind. Because as we get into this, you're going to realize that this whole story and plot seems to overlay and be a metaphor for everything we're going through right now. With the smack scenes, with the Rushkins, and everything else. It all seems to tie in together with the labs and everything. Now, on Saturday, I uploaded a video from a video game called, what was the name of that video game? Siphon Filter. And Siphon Filter in the video game is the name of a virus that selectively takes out people of certain races. This came out in 1999, you guys. And part of it is set in the Ukraine. There's catacombs, just like we just discussed in ODYSEE. So we're going to break that video game down. I just uploaded screenshots from it. I asked you guys to try to make it viral. I think it's got about 12,000 views right now. But what that really needs is for me to go through it and talk about it. Because it's so obvious it actually hurts. You can see, listen, and read for yourself that it's almost the exact plot line of what's happening right now in the world. So maybe that's what this has to do with this whole Rushkin component to this. Let's keep watching.
All of whom now reside in the Little Russia section of Philadelphia.
You and me. As long as I'm with you, no one will ever hurt you. Attaboy, lover. From now on, I'm your right-hand gal.
So the tattoo starts talking to him. He's got schizophrenic tendencies here. And she says that she is his right-hand gal. You guys, what she's talking about here is the mark on the right side or the right hand. So here she is. Here's Scully. Now, some of you are starting to notice something here. That there's this red component, this red hair component to all this, right? And what could that possibly mean? Well, without getting hung up on race and all these things, they use this as a symbol, okay? This is why we shouldn't get hung up on race. It's the same way, like, you know, the evil one uses owls as a symbol. That doesn't mean owls are evil or monarch butterflies, right? So understand that this is the enemy's spiritual symbol. And I don't know much more about it than that. And, you know, if you start delving into that and you want to start placing blame on certain races, understand it's not about you and me and our races. It's about the elite controllers. And they might have some of these traits and attributes, but they're the ones in power. They're the ones who understand the attributes and try to magnify them, possibly, to gain control and power. And they may even have special types of abilities and things. So understand this is about control and power. It's about good and evil. It's not so much about what you look like or where you're from or your physical attributes. So Scully shows up to this tattoo shop and she's basically chasing after the Rushkin, but then she runs into the guy with the crazy evil tattoo. Let's watch.
You did good. Very nice. It's just like in the window. Listen, friend. Everyone gets tattoo they deserve.
Everyone gets tattoo they deserve. Everyone gets tattoo they deserve.
Just the eyes and the mouth. Even if I say yes, it's too soon. Skin must.
So this is crazy. So she's with this guy in the tattoo shop. She meets him for the first time. And why is she over here? Well, she was, again, investigating these Rushkins, and Mulder tells her she needs a break. And so she's in Philadelphia. Now, she has her eye on this particular tattoo, and it's an Ouroboros. Now, I want you to notice that I'm going to zoom this up here, because even though this is the tattoo that she wanted, I want you to notice that there is no blue in the mouth of this Ouroboros. And just keep that in mind as we continue to go through this decode.
I'll pay you anything. Miss, you.
The color, the red on the lips, it's extraordinary.
Something I find in Soviet prison.
So, let's back this up a little bit. So, the guy says, look, you get the tattoo you deserve. And this is the subliminal lie that terror blood makes you unredeemable. Okay, this is what the enemy wants you to think. Because if you really believe that, then what are you going to do? Most people are going to wage war against God, aren't they? If they think they're unredeemable, then what's the use in trying? So that is a lie. Okay, we're all watered down with some of this. Cain was marked by God, but his bloodline mixed with most of humanity down through the ages, somehow leapfrogged across the flood, survived the flood, because then we have the Hamite line that came through. They created the ancient pharaohs, which were also giants. Nephilim, we have many stories of Nephilim giants down throughout the Bible after the flood. In fact, these were the main armies that the Israelites were fighting. They were giant armies. They were Canaanites. They were massive. Many, many stories for those that want to look. The only bloodline that we know for sure remained pure were Jesus' ancestors from the tribe of Judah, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. And it came down through the ages. It's all tracked. Jesus actually recounts his bloodline going back, and none of those people in his ancestry mixed with the Canaanites. And that was the only instance in which God asked people to do that, because he knew Jesus had to be born pure so that he could offer a pure sacrifice, right? Let's keep watching here.
In Soviet prison, tattoo reflect on body what lies in person's soul.
You'd break my heart over it. Did you get them all done in prison?
Yes, I tell him, everyone gets tattoo they deserve.
It usually starts when...
So, he's in the tattoo parlor trying to explain to the artist that the tattoo is cursed. The artist tells him that you get the tattoo you deserved. He got the mark he deserved. But this is programming to make people feel damned because of their bloodline. All flesh is redeemable if you believe in Christ, you guys. It's all redeemable. Now, Scully had her eye on the Ouroboros, and we'll get into that more later. But during her date with this guy, he convinces her to get a tattoo as well. And of course, she chooses the Ouroboros. And you're going to hear now, this is going to give you an indication as to why she chose the Ouroboros.
An authoritative or controlling figure comes into my life. I've always gone around in this circle.
I've always gone around in this circle.
So she says that her life tends to go in cycles or circles of dysfunction. Now, this is meant to make you feel helpless. Okay, Because life does feel like we're going in circles, doesn't it? Some of us keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. But there's no need to feel helpless or hopeless, because the way out of the circle is to step outside of it and be with Jesus. And Jesus helps us do that, doesn't he? Because think about it. Think about all the discussions we've had helping you to step outside the circle. Election cycles, news cycles, right? How do we step outside of that? Well, we understand not to be in the right or the left. You know, what I've noticed about this whole Rushka thing is that people have some very, very strong feelings, one way or the other. And the people that are against them, they want the people over there to suffer too. And the people that are against us, they're kind of going about it the wrong way as well. Conflicts, not just laughing. Really stand on morality. It's crazy. They're starting to open up discussions in some of these stories, right, on the internet. You know, you go on, you look at these news headlines, and below there's a comment section. They're starting to open up some of these things, and people are so lost. They're so lost, you know. And I get in there in the comments on some of them, and I start having discussions with people. I'm like, how is this any different than what we did in the U.S. here over the past 50 years? That we've been getting involved in other people's businesses despite all of the collateral damage. How is this any different? And they're like, oh, you must love that, dictator. I go, no, of course not. Well, then why don't you just go live there? So what is that? That's the right-left paradigm. They're getting triggered. They're thinking just because I have an opinion that's different than theirs that I'm somehow defending him. No, that's not the case. All of this is indefensible. What I'm pointing out is a hypocrisy and how we can get away with one thing and not get cancel cultured, doing something a million times worse than what he's doing right now for far less of a reason. We've justified these kinds of actions in places that are nowhere near our borders. So, you guys, we're living in strange times right now. We're living in very strange times where people are starting to lose their mind. They're losing their ability to think critically. They're engaged in team warfare. In other words, anything for the team. My team wins. No matter what my team does, no matter how dirty and mean and ugly and evil they are, it's my team, and I'm going to stand up for my team. And when you have people thinking in that way, it is a very dangerous time to be living in. Now, let's keep watching this here, because here she's getting the tattoo. Now, this is a very bizarre scene. It's somewhat, there's innuendo here as she's getting this on her lower back. And so all of that has to do with serpent symbolism of how the serpent was with Eve, okay? What the serpent did to Eve. It's all right here. Now, I don't think I put much of that in here. Let's take a look here. She's getting this thing and she's like wincing in pain, but it's really innuendo for something else, right? Now there's the copy, because remember, this is all about clones and copies, isn't it? And the ritual to actually do tattoo art is to first clone or copy it onto the skin. Understand, this is all ritual, you guys. It's all ritual, because we're going to be going over this same cloning aspect in Interview with a Vampire. We'll be covering that tomorrow. And it's the same thing. There's twins in there. There's cloning aspects. There's one of the vampires that actually clones him. He's like a mime. He like mimics Brad Pitt. So cloning is part of this. It's about possession. It's a ritual, a tattooing ritual. Now let's keep watching this.
She wants the same red.
Now, what ends up happening is basically she discovers that, well, we'll get into that later. Let's keep talking about this. So she's at the tattoo shop. And what you're really seeing here is this voodoo piercing ritual that ends up mind controlling the wearer, just like a voodoo doll being pierced by needles. And as we all know, we're in the midst of a worldwide piercing ritual right now, aren't we? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Tom can help you out in the chat if you're confused. But we have to start to move away from using the general language on here because things are getting more and more controlled and tightened on this platform. So Tom will help you out about the worldwide voodoo ritual. Now, the ink of the tattoo is significant in this episode as well as in real life. We did a study last week about the huge toxic release of copper that's unbound from blue and green inks when you try to remove them. Now, the blue and green inks by themselves, tattoo ink, do not, they contain copper, but it's bound. It's basically not bioavailable for your body, so it's not dangerous. It isn't until the removal process. Now, that brings a strange scripture to mind. You can't pull up the tares without pulling up the wheat with it. Isn't that interesting? When you remove the copper, when you remove the blue and green inks that are copper laden, it releases it, which could kill the host in extreme instances, of course. So we have another metaphor, don't we, that ties in spiritually into this ritual. Now, the plot of this episode says that the red blood in the tattoo dye, or the red dye, is what's infected with this pathogen that causes hallucinations. But it isn't the red blood at all that's causing this, in my opinion. And they like to do these kinds of opposites, right? They'll tell you it's one thing, but it's really the exact opposite of it. So in the episode, it's the red blood that they blame on having this pathogen, but it's really the blue blood. And I'll tell you why. The blue ink. Because remember the blue eyes of the girl in the tattoo. They're very striking, aren't they? And that's why she's winking, because they're drawing attention to the eyes that are blue. Let's go back here and see if we can find that. So, there's something else afoot here, isn't there? Let's let this play out a little bit. Wish I could find it. There it is. See this here? The striking blue eyes, and the tattoo moves. So it can go, she can wink, or she could just have her eyes open. So that's really what they're talking about here. It isn't really the red. The red could be the whole, that could play into the whole Scully and the red hair thing. But it's really the blue. Let's keep playing this here.
In Soviet prison.
We're controlling.
I've always got.
She wants the same red.
Now, ironically, it's Scully who's able to fight her sinful tendencies, even though she has.
She wants the same red.
Even though she has the red hair, right?
Like mine.
Now, you're going to see this whole red-haired symbolism thing throughout these kinds of episodes and films. This isn't the only place, where you're going to see this, because later in the week we'll be covering the next season of Raised by Wolves, which is another series that came out. This is the second season, and it's all the same thing. There's a red-haired woman who worships the artificial intelligence. She worships serpents. But again, don't get hung up on trying to associate blame to people with red hair, or, the whole RH negative thing. I don't think that really plays into this unless you're in the elite. This is much more of a secret society and power thing than it is about physical characteristics.
I feel different. It's like, I don't know how I feel about that. It feels weird. I can't see it.
The resident downstairs, Kay Schilling, was reported missing. Some blood was found in her apartment.
Now, so the guy kills his neighbor because he thinks that she's talking about him, because his tattoo takes over his mind. It causes him to kill his neighbor. And what do they find in the blood? They find ryegrass mold in his blood, which he got from supposedly the red ink. But again, we determined it wasn't really the red ink, it's the blue ink. Let's keep watching here.
Not hers. It had some abnormalities.
Well, a preliminary toxicology report found this substance in the bloodstains. Blood type was A, and hers was O.
So here it is, ryegrass. Now, we had found that ryegrass is copper dominant just a few weeks ago, didn't we? We were just talking about ryegrass being copper dominant. And we were talking about it was the likely candidate for the notorious tare mentioned in the Bible that grows up along with the wheat. That even biblical scholars had done research and they associated ryegrass with the likely candidate to be the tare. Now, the ryegrass carries this fungus called ergot, and it's what causes hallucinations. And here's where you get the close-up of Scully's tattoo. And there you see the blue taint, the blue dot in the mouth. That wasn't there before. Remember, I asked you to remember? But there it is. And this is what they were really getting at, wasn't it? The blue copper is the taint. When blue tattoo ink is removed, the copper releases into the bloodstream and can have toxic effects. So, what I don't show here is that Scully does confront the guy and tells him to try to overcome his urges. So again, this is all about tendencies, sinful tendencies. And so I looked up this ergot that's mentioned in the episode, and lo and behold, ergot is a fungus. And it affects wheat as well in some instances. And what's interesting about ergot is that it can induce the loss of offspring in the womb for both humans and livestock. Here's the Wikipedia page here, and I'll put this in the comment section. I'll pin it in there. But it goes on to explain that this is actually used to induce a spontaneous loss of the child in the womb. So here you have a direct reference to the war of the serpent on the seed of the woman. Wow.
That an ergot alkaloid was found in the blood. Now, ergot is a parasite that lives off of rye and related grasses. Svo said that he used rye somehow in his ink. He may be subject to hallucinogenic ergotism, oral, visual hallucinations, dangerous and unlikely behavior.
So the guy tries to burn it off of his arm. It doesn't work. And Scully realizes she's marked with this tattoo. So I don't know how much more clear it can get, but this is just crazy. What else? I think I had another thing pulled up here. Here's an article on ryegrass ergot, which is, again, the mold that grows on the ryegrass. This is a particular strain that exists in Texas, East Texas. So this stuff is everywhere. Again, this is spiritual manifestations in the natural realm. This is why God tells you that his glory is seen in nature, in his creation. I believe it says that in the Bible somewhere. And so we're supposed to be looking at these things to get bits and pieces of truth to show God's glory. Okay. Now, let me go back into the chat, see what you guys are up to, because this is just unbelievable. Hey guys, Enterthestars, and we are hot on the trail of this bee phenomenon that's been happening, that you're seeing in the headlines of the news this summer. And thank you to the subscriber that pointed me into the direction of the X-Files. I think we are getting close to cracking the code on these bees. Now, this is the Heron Volk episode of the X-Files. And this was one of the first episodes where they featured the bees. And many of you will remember the bees, and they were talking about spreading a virus through the bees, okay, in these episodes. This was back in 1996. Now, Herrenvolk, you'll be shocked to understand, means master race here in Wikipedia. And this is all about the Aryan race, Nordic race, everything about Nazism, Heil Hitler. We talked about all this, you guys. HH, 88. This is everything we're talking about. Now, why they named that episode Herrenvolk, I think there were some clones in that episode. And maybe they were cloning these children to be master race children. It talks all about eugenics also in hierarchy in this Wikipedia article. So this was the name of the original bee episode. Now, this is all based in Germany. We've been talking about the bees being related back to the tribe of Dan in Germany. This all fits into everything we've been talking about, you guys. Now, this is the Zero Sum episode, which happened a little bit later. This was in 1997, in the following year. And this episode carried the bee theme along with it. And then finally, we have the X-Files film. And they have a part in the film that shows the bees. And they actually find the bee farm where they're manufacturing these bees to disperse this virus. Okay, you guys? Now I want you to look at the release date on the X-Files movie that came out in 1998. The date is June 19th. So I did a search on June 19th, bees, and this is what I found. Just last week, there was a bumblebee die-off in Eugene, Oregon, and it is under investigation. The date of this article is June 19th. They match. We've been having some concerns about the bees dying and Obama's money that he's putting forward to quote-unquote help the bees. So you guys, here we are again at the cutting edge of finding this information.
That's a security feature. I had it put in after 9/11. I had it put in after 9/11.
Hey guys, Enter the Stars, and what seems like a random X-Files episode about werewolves is much, much more than that. Season 10, Episode 3, which is 13, of the X-Files, The Weir Monster, released on February 1st. Converting that from Julian de Gregorian, it's February 14th, which is Valentine's Day. This just so happens to be the middle day of Lupercalia. And this, again, is an episode about werewolves. February 15th is the middle day of Lupercalia. Now, something interesting occurred in the opening scenes of this film. We saw the mention of 9/11. And what many people don't know is that on February 26, 1993, the World Trade Center was bombed, and that this event tied in to Lupercalia. Now, why does this matter? Because mass sacrifice occurred on that day, February 26th. And when we convert this date from the Gregorian back to the Julian calendar, it does indeed fall on February 13th. The first day of Lupercalia. Now, in examining some of the screenshots from the third installment of the X-Files, we see February 13th on the license plate, Ecstasy, February 13th, the first day of Lupercalia. We see the broken glass as well, and we saw this on Valentine's Day when Obama released Obamacare in the BuzzFeed. We also see the moon here and lots of just overt wolf and Lupercalia references within this episode. Now, the episode in of itself is a mirror episode. In other words, man bites a lizard creature that looks like the devil. And then when the moon comes out, this lizard thing turns into a man. So it's all like opposite. It's also interesting how they incorporate the lizard or the reptilian that shoots blood out of his eyes as part of the werewolf story. So it's the werewolf story with a twist. Let's put it that way. So all of this is not what it seems. It's not just some random werewolf episode. This episode is linked into Lupercalia, as I just demonstrated to you, under which there was a mass sacrifice on both 9/11 and 1993. Take care and be safe.
Get this live hangout started. Everything today, but I do want to cover this very quickly. This will probably take about half an hour. And I'm really glad you guys can make it on today. We got a pretty good crowd, it seems. Give a couple shout outs. Let's do a sound check. Somebody hit me in the chat here and let me know if you guys in fact hear what I'm saying. What I had to do on this, you guys, my computer's giving me some issues. So I went ahead and pulled these clips up on my Movie Maker, okay? And I'm going to play this first clip. And this is everything we've been talking about, sorry about that, about all of us having alien DNA. Listen. You saw a definite correlation there of all of us having alien DNA. I'm going to show you something now that is also pretty wild and crazy. You also heard her talk about synchronicity, which is outlined on this channel all the time. This is what this channel is all about. But it's a little off. That's not exactly what happened. The alien DNA came in before with Cain and the serpent. Okay, this is where the alien DNA came. The vaccines simply are manufactured to trigger certain things within the DNA, okay, because they know how the DNA works. Let's continue on here. Days before this released, let me pull this up so you guys can see it here. The end of the world as we know it. On February 20th, we talked all about November 16th and November 17th in this live broadcast on February 20th, 2 days before this release. Now, there's no way I could have known this except if I was an insider in the X-Files, but I'm not, of course. So, November 17th, the anti-date. We looked at the end of the world as we know it. I'll give you a quick synopsis of that. The song came out on 11/16 at the halfway point to 9/11, 1987. The song by REM, which is all about the eye. Rapid eye movement. And we looked at the anti-date of that. The first date of Lupercalia. Lupercalia, they said that Valentine's Day 2016 would be the end of the world. And then we have the end of the world as we know it by REM. Do you see how it all fits together now? So we covered that. And then here it is on the X. Hey guys, Enter the Stars. Let's go in here and get this live hangout started. Okay, talking about and clips up on my Movie Maker. Okay. And I'm going to play this first clip. And this is everything we've been talking about.
Every American citizen is what you're thinking right now.
Agent Mulder's phone.
Who's this? Dana?
Yes, who's this?
It's Cat O'Malley.
I was just watching your show.
You need to get over here.
Look, tampering with our DNA. I was given a smallpox vaccine as a child. As a Tampering with our DNA. I was given a smallpox vaccine as a child. Tampering with our DNA. I was given a smallpox vaccine as a child. As I'm sure you were as well. It was standard practice in America at the time.
If you are suggesting